I'll sing with TJ at the end. So
Oh, you are?
no,
Promise?
no. But people do think that I could sing.
Who thinks that?
No, someone told me. Someone told me.
I didn't mean that in a mean way.
You can
but-
both sing.
Welcome to This is Kingdom. This is Grace.
This is Talon.
This is TJ.
And this week we will be talking about the talk the Lord Jesus Christ teaches us to minister by Elder Juan Antonio Uceda. We actually don't know if that's his middle name, but we decided it is because it just sounded good.
Just roll off the tongue.
It's a really good talk. This is a really nice talk. And I just got to share these. There's this little thing, cute thing he references President Nelson in the beginning where he talks about how the good shepherd lovingly cares for all his sheep. And we are his true under shepherds. Mm-hmm. It's kind of cute, under shepherds. And then he says that we need to add our love to our friends and neighbors by feeding, tending, and nurturing them. So feed your friends. Feed your people, man.
That would be TJ's favorite part.
People. When we were in the teachers' quorum meeting today and we were planning activities, and I'm like, man, I don't care what we do as long as we have some good food after, man.
Something
like,
about food
get that
changes
budget
things.
up. Let's get that budget. Let's go. This one of my boys was like, let's go Chuckarama. I was like, yeah, okay, Luke. All right. Anyway. Feeding, tending, and nurturing our friends and neighbors. And then he shares this really cool story. Go listen to the talk again, listen to that story. But this is the thing that hit me from this whole talk, is that our love, but I mean, more big picture, like God's love through us will bring people back to God and church when they've left.
Whoa.
Our love will bring people back. And this is the thing that has really hit me over my life. And maybe you guys have some cool experiences to share about this, but like if someone you know and someone that you love and you have a good relationship, if they leave God or leave the church, but they don't leave you, like you still connected, you are their connection to God and to church. You know what I mean? So if something happens down the road, which it usually does, and things get stirred up in their life and or whatever their journey looks like, if they feel that love from you, it could save them. You know what I mean? It'll connect them to God still. Even if they've left him and left church, because you got the love of God in you, they're connected to God still. That's what hit me.
So that's super intriguing to me to think about. I've been actually thinking about like this sort of idea for like the past week, super specifically. I think Come Follow Me reminded me of this.
We're going to go with that.
Maybe. And, but I was thinking about it a lot, and I had this moment that I was just like starting to think, and this is weird. This is my anxiety speaking probably, but I'm a big overthinker. I know that about myself, obviously, but I like always think, I always am worried if when I get to heaven, if I'm going to recognize Jesus. Like that's like important. I don't remember, someone probably said that in a conference talk, and now it just like has me
there's
panicking.
no stories of like you not recognizing them. You're like, what if I don't?
They're like, and so then like, the anxious part of Grace is like, I'm not going to recognize him. I'm like, oh my. So I like panic about that, but it was so cool because I had this realization this week that I just started thinking, and there was like a few different names that I thought of, just like people that kind of have impacted my relationship with Jesus. And it was so cool because at the end when I was just like listing all these people, it was because of Come Follow Me, just so you know. I just remembered that, even though none of you care.
We care. We care.
But I like listed all these people, and then all of a sudden at the very end, I just had this moment that like the Spirit so strongly was like, oh, you're going to recognize him because you know them. And it's just this cool thought that like, oh wait, actually, like we might not think that has like that's a big deal, like loving people, and even if they are like stepping away or taking a break or whatever, like still loving them. But what if they actually could get to know him better through you? What if one day they'll recognize him because they know you? You know?
Yeah, honestly, like this is like my motto. I have it like printed out. Dre probably doesn't like it because it's janky. It's just like this paper that I printed out and I put it above our window, but I love it. And it just says love deeper, love pure, love more. Because I had this like realization that I was like trying to help some people, and I was trying to do all these different things to help them, like maybe this activity, like maybe this thing, you know what I mean? And like the more that I thought about it, I'm like, man, there's actually nothing more transformative than like truly feeling God's love. And a lot of times we feel that like through people, you know, and it became like one of my greatest desires of like, I want to be a vessel of God's love. Like I want whoever it is that interacts with me to feel that. And I think sometimes I forget that. And sometimes I get distracted, but I'm like, no, actually, when I think about who I want to be, it is just like an extension of God's love. Like that's my goal. That's what I want. And I think the hard thing is there's a lot of things that make that difficult. There's like a lot of things that get in the way of that. But I think if any of us like really think it's like, oh yeah, that's what I want to be.
Yeah. I just feel like when I've had bad experiences with certain organizations or with different just things in life, man, if there's someone that I can think of in that organization or in that place that makes it like worth it for me, it starts to change my mind a little bit about, okay, maybe my attitude was a little, you know, I'm not perfect. They're not perfect. But if you got someone in there that's like, you know, you could feel the love, you could feel God, that might start to change things. And I can't help but think what if you've got a friend, what if we've got a friend that down the road, and the thing that brings them back is, you know, a lot of this whack stuff happened in the church when I was younger. A lot of whack things happened in my family, and I looked up to them. It was messed up. Maybe, or I had a bishop that did something really stupid. But man, I remember Talon, or I remember Grace, man, and they were actually really living and following the things that these people were trying to teach. Maybe I'll give another shot. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a crazy thought to me. Makes it worth it to cultivate and try to feel that love, God's love, like that you mentioned earlier.
Okay, now this is my question for the day. Is all of a sudden now, like when TJ talks, like I'm like, okay, yeah, like I want that. Like I want to live my life like that. Like I want to see things differently like that. And that little motto, I don't remember. It's just love deeper is the first one. Love pure, love.
Nice. Love it.
Deeper,
more.
Love deeper, love pure, love more.
Oh,
That's my thing.
okay, I guess
Right
it. Okay, what does that look like? Like actually. Like if you were going to teach someone how to love like that, like what does that look like?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that we're going to have a lot of thoughts on this. Let me just start us off. My first thought, and I think the reason this has been on my mind is I feel like I experienced it recently. Sometimes people like let us down, or like they don't live up to maybe who we thought they were, or you know what I mean? Or it's just like things happen that disappoint us. I think loving like God does is seeing their best version when the best version is not being shown in the moment. Does that make sense? It's like when they're not living up to like who you see them as through God's eyes, it's still treating them like that person, and it's still seeing them as like their truest potential, as the best version of themselves. And I have people who've done that. Like for me, where like I feel like down about myself, and I like, because I know I've done stupid things and I know I've messed up, but then there's those people in my life who still see me so highly and still see me as someone so capable and someone so great. And then part of me on the inside is like, I'm not that person, but I'm like, they really believe that. Like they really see that, you know? And like I think that is one of the first things, like when you're loving someone, it's like, no, like even if they do slip up, even if they do make mistakes, like even if they fall short of what I know they really can be, like I'm going to see like their truest potential, and I'm going to see the greatest version of them. And I think the more you see that in someone, the more that person will come to believe that about themselves.
I love that. Yeah, I think one thing for me is, and Talon, you bring this up a lot, but just like acting on promptings when they come. You get the thought to call this person, call them. You get the thought to text or to bring something or whatever. I think the more you build that muscle of acting on promptings to love on somebody, I just feel like my capacity to love and to feel God's love and to see others like God sees them, it just builds and builds and builds.
Well, and I think with that too, one of my favorite quotes by President Monson was actually by Shakespeare, but then President Monson said it, and it's those who don't show love, don't love. And I think a lot of times it's like, we'll feel love for these people. We're like, we'll think about how much we care about them, but like, we don't actually do anything. And like, just thinking about it is not enough. And I think sometimes we want to do like the perfect thing for them, or we want to do something so big or something so magical. But I can't remember who told me, but they're like, the smallest actions are better than the greatest intentions. And I think the more it's like, I'm just going to show that I love, and I'm going to do little things. Like I'm going to ponder that. Like, what can I do to show this person that I love them? I think the more you do that, the more you can start communicating that love that we have.
Love that. Grace, what you happy about?
That was really good. I don't know. That's just like making me think. And I think it's cool because I think sometimes we get in our own heads about like what we have to do, and we overcomplicate what it looks like to love people well. And we get all worried that we're not going to do it perfectly, or we're not good enough to like accomplish what we need to do. Or maybe in our heads, we're like, I'm never going to be the person, like I'm not good enough to bring the person closer to Jesus. Like I can't love them that big. And I think it's cool that it's just like, well, just try.
Do something.
Yeah, just like start.
Well,
you know?
I had the worst experiences actually with one of my companions on the mission, and like I really looked up to him. Like I really liked him. I thought he was such a good guy. Like I felt so much love for him. And then a little while into being companions, we like had this big argument, and he's like, you don't even love me. And I was like taken back. I was like, what you talking about? Like I love you so much. He's like, yeah, what have you done to show that? And I like genuinely thought about it, and I started racking my brain of like all the things that I've done, and I was like speechless. I was like, I actually don't have anything like that I could say. And it like changed the way I wanted to like live in relationships, you know? Like I want to live in a way that if they were to ask, you know, like, what have you done to show your love? I'm like, oh, let me tell you. Like, I don't even want that to be a question. I don't want people to even wonder if I like them or if I love them or if I care about them. Like, I don't want that to be a question. And I think sometimes we've talked about this, like we're worried about being the one that cares more. You know, but it's like, man,
I'm weak for that.
That's who Jesus is. He's the one who cares more. He's the one who keeps caring when you like don't even listen to him, when you ignore him, when you turn your back on him, you know?
And so what? You know, like I just want to be like, if Jesus wasn't afraid to do that, like if he's the one that set the pattern, I'm like, so what? So what? You care more. Yeah. That's not embarrassing. You shouldn't be embarrassed to love someone. Like you shouldn't be ashamed of that. Like that's actually cool. And that's actually a compliment. Like that's actually exciting to be like, oh no, like I actually really do care about you. Like let me show up on your doorstep with a treat when you're having a crappy day. Yeah. Even if I like don't really know you that well, because like, why not? Yeah. You know? And I think that was Jesus's like final sermon, right? Like he's having the Last Supper, and he's like, as I have loved you, love one another. Which don't you love? His sermon on love is like, hey, what you've seen me do, go do that. You know, it's like the best sermon. And then he says, by this shall men know that ye are my disciples. And I think we wonder, like, what's like a faithful member? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what does it look like to be like a good, and I'm like, man, that's it. Like he told you, like, if you want to be a disciple, like love like Jesus. Love more. Yeah. Love deeper, love pure, love more. Isn't that kind of good? You kind of like it now, don't you? Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Thanks for letting him keep that up, Dre. He's helping us right now.
Yeah, holy.
And like how? No, you go.
Well, it's just so cute now because now love more to means like love more. I want that to be my life motto, just because I want to be like, oh, you can actually love more than the other person, and it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I can actually be proud of that. I can be proud of the one who loves more in the relationship. Because he did. Because that's how Jesus loved. And if he's asking us to love like him, like we better love more. Yeah.
And if we're going to love like him, we better be thinking about him and reading about him and putting all that
to
spiritual
see
work
what
in.
it looked like to love like he does.
Yeah.
Wow, this
Boom.
is so good.
Let's do it.
TJ, give it to him.
We know he's coming to gather his sheep and lead them to Zion in love. For why in the valley of death should they weep, or in the lone wilderness rove?
See you next week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that
Every
must
time
be.
you sit by someone, you're like, is this the person?
Yeah, I'm like, I guess I have to give a Book of Mormon out on this flight. Like, I'm like, that's what this has to be. And it's interesting because today when I've been thinking about it, it kind of changed. And I think testify, maybe just because it's like a bigger word, we don't usually use that in like everyday vocabulary. Yeah. Like it's just kind of attached to church. Maybe that's why. But I like all of a sudden started thinking about different moments. And I was like, oh, actually, maybe what this like is meaning is not just like these big like moments in front of like at the chapel and on an airplane giving away a Book of Mormon and like these moments that you like are bearing straight testimony. But it made me start thinking about like, oh, what does it actually look like to just talk about Jesus? like speak of Jesus in your life? And are we doing that enough? You know, because I think we get really caught up in like sharing our testimony big, but this talk all of a sudden made me start thinking like, oh, but am I talking about him? Because like when you like someone, or like, this is a good example. When you have a crush on someone, you want to talk about them all the time.
That's fact.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like every conversation, like you just like want to find a way to just
And
like
your friends are
sneak
like
them
kind of
in.
annoyed because they're like, oh, that's all they want to talk about
Yeah,
right now.
yeah. They're like, stop. We've heard about this for 2 weeks straight. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. But in my head, I'm like, what if we started doing that with Jesus? That instead, it's not even just like a formal, like, oh, let me tell you what I believe. Let me tell you about my religion. But instead, it's like you're living your life, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, wait, this reminds me of this, and it's actually about Jesus. You know?
I like that. I like that. Here's my question though, because it can, like, when your friends only want to talk about their crush, you know what I mean? It can get like a little bit annoying. It's like, holy cow, like you will not stop talking about this. How do you do that in a way that it's not annoying? It's not weird either. You know, that it's just like natural and actually meaningful.
Yeah, what's the balance? Okay, one thought that I have is I think you got to read. I don't know, maybe this is wrong too. Push back on this, but I'm like, sometimes you got to read the room. And that's why I love encouraging the seminary students or youth that were around. Like, make sure you got some friends around you that you could talk about Jesus with if you wanted to. You know what I mean? And I think there's a space for both. Like, you want to be able to talk about him to everybody, but, you know, different people are going to receive it in different ways. And if you got some people around you could be talking about him with, I feel like that kind of validates and helps you talk about him more. I don't know. What you guys think?
Okay. I don't know if this is right
is
either,
gonna
but
be a
let's
good
just
thought. Here we
unpack it.
go.
Let's just unpack it and see what happens. But like going back to that, like you brought it up, is like sometimes that's annoying. Like sometimes you like stop talking about it. But I feel like that's actually the only case when you keep saying the same stuff over and over and over again. Hear me out on it. Like if
True,
you
because
just
when your friend got a crush, like you kind of want to hear the new stuff. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You're like, hey, what happened
That's
lately?
true. That
Like,
doesn't
what's
get
going on? What's the update?
And then it's not
Yeah.
annoying, right? But if they just like keep saying the same old stuff, then you're like, we have unpacked this story 18 times.
We
You are
all
like,
know what you
"We
need to
can't."
do,
Yeah.
and you still won't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We know you need to pray. No, I'm just kidding.
So then in my head, I'm like, oh, maybe the problem sometimes is not actually that we're bringing him up, but are we living in a way that we have new stories with Jesus, that it actually just comes up naturally, you know? Because if you go back and you're sitting there and you're telling everyone the same story every single
from my
time you talk
mission?
about Jesus.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, right?
Hey, talk about your mission, man. But if it's every 2 minutes, you telling the same story, man.
Or like, what about like FSY? Like you're like all year long, you're like, oh, at FSY, I had this crazy experience at FSY. Then people are going to be like, okay, great. Like we love that you loved FSY, but now what? And part of me wants to say, actually, maybe the conversations would just happen naturally if living with Jesus was your natural life. And then maybe it wouldn't be annoying because then it'd be so easy to just throw it in there. Like all of a sudden you're talking about something casual and you're like, hey, like, yeah, actually, like I've been thinking about this and like this connects to that and da 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 da.
I like that.
Yeah, I love that. We, in my institute class that I teach, we have this idea of our journey with Christ. We start with it every day. And I do in seminary too. But just how have you been seeing Christ in your life lately? Because I feel like and I think your mom did that in her seminary class too, and it made me want to do that too. And it's like, man, if we're not, because you got to kind of be intentional about setting apart time and think about like how you actually been seeing him. It's not just like a natural like thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I love the idea of let's think for a little bit, ponder, okay, where did we see him? I think President Eyring did that too, right? Where he had a talk where he would write down something, a way he saw God's hand every day and everything.
You look like you're pondering. Were you pondering something or you were just thinking?
Just thinking. I'm loving it.
Well, because this is now what I want to think about with this is I actually feel like Jesus showed us this pattern. Like, I think that's one of the coolest things that Jesus does is that he actually just lives. Like, if you actually read scripture, what happens is Jesus actually just lives and he speaks about his Father naturally through life, right? Like to the fishermen, he said, okay, let me talk about something that you're going to get. Let me talk about fishing. But I can connect that to something bigger. You know what I'm saying? Or like the woman that like grabbed his robe, that was him actually just living his life. And he said, let me talk about something that's going to make sense to you, you know? And it like just makes me think that like, what if you actually just normalized talking about Jesus like he was actually your friend? Like he was actually someone that you're stoked about. And like, what if it didn't have to be that big of a deal? Like, what if you don't have to start out and like have like this really like big moment and you don't have to use really formal words? Like, what if you actually can just share your stories with him in a really natural way, because that's just how you're living your life, that he just seems to come up.
Yeah. Okay, this is my next question then. Because I really think, especially if you're listening to this right now, like all the people listening to this, all of us, like we want more experiences with him. Like we genuinely want like these experiences where we feel close to him, we feel connected, like we like see Christ in our lives. Like what would be your best, I don't know, just advice for like how to see that more in your life, you know? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I want to share those.
How to be as excited about Jesus as you are as your crush.
Oh, yeah, that.
Yeah, I think one thought for me is I love this quote, and you guys will know I love this quote from Sister Corden, but she says, we want to create muscle memory of discipleship.
Why you like that, TJ?
And, just because it really resonates in some ways. And muscle memory
TJ
of
says if it's connected to the gym, I love it.
It's true. And testimony that will bring into, it's just easy for me to physical to understand the spiritual. Muscle memory of discipleship, testimony that will bring into focus our reliance on our Savior each day. And I think Paul talked about it too, right? He said, you didn't get baptized in my name. And he's like, anything good that's happening, whether we're teaching it or whatever experiences, like is all from God. You know what I mean? So I think first off, like just doctrinally understanding the good things that come into our life, the good experiences that we have, it's not coincidence, it's coming from him, because all the good things come from God. That's one big thing for me. Creating the muscle memory of, it wasn't just a really cool thing that happened. It's like God's watching out for me and he's helping things fall into place in my life. That's one thing for me.
That's
I love
cool.
that. And the other thing that she talked about that I loved is taking like those little things from a checklist to a witness. And at first I was like, how do you make that a witness? But if you think about what it means to be a witness, it means like you saw something, you were there and like you saw it.
Well, can I point out something from you?
Yeah.
Because she brought up fasting, right? And I remember like,
man,
a long time ago.
out on fasting.
Well, a long time ago, we would talk about that. We would kind of have this running joke that Talon hates fasting and everything. But recently.
It wasn't a joke, but.
But recently, you had this crazy experience with fasting, and it didn't sound like going through the motions. It sounded like witness.
Yeah, and I just think the more intentional we can get about everything that we do, right? Not just like doing it because we're supposed to do it, but of like, okay, I'm going to read my scriptures with the sole purpose of I want to witness something about Christ. I want to see something new about him. I want to see something different, And it's like whatever you're doing, it's like I'm going to the temple. Like, no, I'm not just checking this off the list. Like I'm going to witness. I'm going to see something that I haven't seen. And I'm just, it's hard to live that intentionally because it's very easy to like get in this like, rut? Is that the right word? Why does that sound weird? You know what I mean? Where it's just like,
just kind of surviving.
You're doing things to do them and like you have your checklist and you just do them. But I think the second you like really step back and think, no, I'm going to be intentional about everything that I'm doing. And maybe we're doing the right things, but it's intentionality that we need to add to that. It's like purpose behind the plans,
Yeah.
Well, and it just sort of makes me think like maybe it would be helpful like to discover a way that you individually connect with him, And that sometimes like we get really overwhelmed with 18 million things that we need to do. And maybe you just need to start finding that one that no matter what's going to connect you. Like maybe it's going to be music and you're like, okay, like actually I know that like if I start here, that's going to be a good first step for me. Like that automatically makes me feel something a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Because I think if you know where to go for first step, then it's a little bit easier to find second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth.
It's so true.
And like if like all of a sudden it's like, okay, let's say reading isn't your thing. Like that's like you're a bad reader or whatever, but like you're really good at like talking. And you're like, okay, I can talk to God. And like maybe it's just being like, okay, first step, talk to God because that's how you connect with him easy. Like start there, get that, because once you have a connection, it's so much easier to be stoked about it and be like, okay, like I can start here, like I can figure this out. And the next step is all of a sudden, okay, now that I'm stoked on this again, like now that I feel like there's a baseline, now let me figure out this whole scripture thing. Let me try to like discover more about him through this. And then after that, it's like, okay, I get nervous about talking about Jesus with my friends, but maybe now that I've had these two things and I'm starting to see what he's like, maybe it'll be easier for me to see what he's like in my friends.
And it's fun because then with your friends, all you're doing is sharing what has happened already in that early process, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, And I've probably talked about this before, but like for me, one of the biggest things is like end of the day, like just my prayer journal. Like I
started doing that because of you. Did you know
start
that?
doing it? I'm obsessed with it. And I'll just like write about like what I'm most feeling like throughout that day. And then I'll talk to God about it. Like it's what I do at the end of every single day. And like, it really is a time that I feel like maybe if I'm bringing stress to him, he's like, hey, can I point something out to you about that? You know, or if like I'm bringing problems, he's like, hey, did you notice all these good things going on? You know what I mean? I just feel like the more I bring to him like what I'm feeling and then like give him a second to talk about it.
So will you pray first and then write what you feel like he's given you, or will you write down what stressed you and then
Yeah, and obviously there's not like one way to do it. For me though,
but maybe
like,
if there's
I love,
someone that wants to
I love to like write what I'm feeling, like write what was on my mind, what was on my heart, like what was pressing that day, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, all right, God, like let's talk about this. And it's just
that's cool.
It's interesting, but I think that would just be my challenge for everybody. Like whatever your practices are right now, like man, we're proud of you for doing them. Like we're proud of you for the efforts. And more important than that, like God's proud of you. Like he sees those efforts. But I think the more you can make those like purposeful and intentional, the more you are going to like witness him and like see his hand and see his guidance. And then talking about him is going to be the most exciting thing ever. Like talking about him is going to be more exciting than talking about your crush, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And then, sorry, just one thing I want to add on that too is, and my bishop pointed out just making sure that we're doing things for kind of the right reasons and being intentional about the reasons. So one thing I'll do is if I'm praying, sometimes I'll read my scriptures on the way home from the gym. I won't read them, but I'll listen to them.
TJ reading
And
He's like,
but sometimes I'll just turn it on because that's my thing that I do. But the times when I'm like, Heavenly Father, I'm going to throw these scriptures on. Will you just help me, find something to connect with you or help me with something in my life? It always hits different doing that. So sorry, I just want to share that part. He's the one who healed the leper and who brought the dead to life. He's the one who fed the hungry and gave the blind their sight. He's the one who walked on water, then he brought them safe to shore. And whenever you may need him, he's the one you're looking for, so let him in. He will take away your pain. When you feel his love, you'll never be the same. Come unto Christ, come unto him, and by his grace be made holy again. He's calling your name, he's waiting for you with arms open wide. Come unto Christ.
see you next week.
That was good.